Dr. Blackie, for somebody who might have missed this advert, for you, what is it about it that shows it, exposes it to be tone deaf and really not insensitive?
Well, I guess I'm a researcher that spends a lot of time with people who have either abandoned children or children who've been abandoned, or with the adoption community who have adopted children. So I'm particularly sensitive to their plight, and especially in the context of South Africa. And what upset me about the advert is that they really have made a joke of adoption and of children who are being adopted. So the advert not only says, you know, you're adopted, but it also says, have you ever asked why you don't look like anything like us? And yeah, it really is trying to, in the words of Arise Family, which is an NGO who was really upset about this particular ad, they said, the joke is you're trying to other the child in the family and make them feel like they don't belong. And that's a real problem in this country. And I guess that was really what I was trying to explain in the article I wrote, was that in a country with the highest child abandonment stats in the world, and real challenges around the process of adoption, we shouldn't be making jokes about it. We should be taking these issues really seriously, and it's not a laughing matter.
Yeah, and you wrote to Escort, or you engaged with them, from what I understand in the article, and the other NGO as well did so. What was their response?
So I sent a letter to their advertising agency because originally I come from the marketing and communication community. So I sent a letter to them. Arise sent a letter to Escort, and they responded, both the agency and Escort responded in a letter to us. And they said, well, we were just really, it was about social satire. And in fact, you know, it's not really a problem because the child in question isn't really adopted. They're just making a joke out of adoption. They're just
but you can't make a joke.
Him.
You can't make a joke out of adoption in a country where week in, week out, we would read about a baby being found dumped in a drain, in a dustbin. I mean, it's a serious social issue. I mean, it's one of those areas where even at the level of being satirical, you really need to get your tone appropriate.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a time when people used to make jokes about people with disability. There's been plenty of opportunities where people have made jokes about people's race or their sexual orientation. And saying, oh, well, it was only a joke, doesn't take away the insult and doesn't take away the hurt that they cause. In fact, what had happened was I was contacted by members of the adoption community because they, as adoptive parents, had been watching a YouTuber, and this ad had popped onto their screen, and their child had actually seen the ad. And now you can imagine if you are an adoptive child and you see somebody telling you that, you know, you're adopted in a very negative way and that you don't look like your family. I mean, how does that make the child feel? I obviously try to bring that sensitivity to both Escort and their agency, but they didn't seem to think it was a problem. And that was when I took exception and decided to write an article about it.
Yeah, I would like to speak to Escort. I mean, I've asked my producers that we should try and reach out to Escort because they are the owners of the product. The messaging, of course, was done by the advertising agency, which then tells me that the agency concerned is tone deaf itself. I wonder what kind of other messaging they produce for which brands, because in today's world, you cannot afford to be tone deaf.
No, no. I think, you know, as I say, I come from a marketing background, and market research is critical. So if they'd even done the most basic amount of research into issues around adoption, child abandonment in the context of South Africa, they would have seen what a crisis it is and how insensitive an advert of that nature would be. I mean, we have around 3,500 children being abandoned every year in this country. You know, and I mean,
and it is wrong. It is wrong to other them.
Has.
Yeah, it is wrong to other them. And also, if I'm an adult and I have this desire and the need to adopt, and I see that advert, I might start thinking twice that what's going to happen to my child if I've adopted, because they're going to be watching and seeing this kind of societal presentation of the act of adoption. And we need adoption to be tackled properly in this country. Messages like this ad from Escort are not good, are not helping.
Yeah. My research looked at the lived experience of child abandonment and adoption in South Africa. And many of the interviews I did with especially young adults who found out that they'd been adopted on the death of a parent, and they'd been told by their biological family, you don't actually belong here. You can't take part in the burial rituals. You can't inherit the family home. And in fact, this was taken to the Constitutional Court, and a ruling was made just last month in around the 16th of April by the Constitutional Court, stating that that adopted children must be able to inherit from their adoptive parents or grandparents. It's a constitutional right to a family and to inheritance, and to not do so is unfair and unconstitutional.
So Dr. Blackie, what are you going to do? I mean, and the NGOs that you guys have engaged with, Escort and the agency, and from what you're saying, they don't seem to really grasp the severity or the seriousness of their messaging, that this time they were really tone deaf, and it's not helping in terms of dealing with children adoption in the country. What else can you do now?
Well, obviously, the article in the Daily Maverick just had a huge impact, and thank you so much for inviting us onto your program to talk about this. We have put a complaint into the advertising regulatory body, and I'm hoping that they'll come back and inform the agency that they must remove this advert, because I don't want any more adoptive children coming across it. The impact that it has on their sense of identity, their sense of belonging, is really damaging, and I don't think communicators or advertisers think hard enough about the impact that they have on society, and that they should be held responsible for making these kinds of slurs.
Obviously, this agency didn't. Obviously, this agency didn't, from what we can hear from you. Are you on your own in the complaint to the Advertising Standards Authority?
I have told the adoption community, and I do know that the National Adoption Coalition of South Africa is also going to put in a complaint. I'm not sure if they've done that already. I would really welcome as many complaints as possible, because I think if people are offended as I was by this advert, I think you need to, as consumers of brands such as Escort, you need to stand up and say this kind of communication is not acceptable. These aren't the values that we hold dear in South Africa, where we have such a strong constitution that promises equality and freedom from discrimination. And essentially, this ad has just discriminated against some of the most vulnerable people of our society. So I really do encourage as many people as possible to complain to the Advertising Standards Authority. And I guess I really ask communicators and advertisers to think hard about the messages that they're sharing on such a powerful platform such as the mass media. Because it counts, and it's devastating when you see that kind of just ignorance and, as you said, tone deaf. As I said in my article, it leaves a really bad taste in your mouth. And as a food brand, Escort is a food brand, that's not what you want to be doing as a business or as a brand, is leaving a bad taste in people's mouths. And I think that's what they've achieved with this advert. Yeah,
well, I'll certainly keep track of developments here, Dr. Dee Blackie, and good luck with you and the adoption community in South Africa as you tackle this matter, the Advertising Standards Authority. Hopefully, we will succeed as well here on ENCA to speak to Escort to find out what they think now that they have been contacted by you, but they still carrying on advertising in this manner. Thank you very much. That's Dr. Dee Blackie from the National Adoption Coalition of South Africa.